everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for another Careers in Peacebuilding talk story today. I'm going to introduce our wonderful moderator, Dr. Maya Soetoro, one of our faculty here at the Mount Sinai Institute for Peace. And thank you so much again. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much. And I would like to thank the Matsunaga Institute and you specifically, Jose, for this Careers in Peacebuilding series. And thank you to all of you who are watching on our live stream or in the room, and those who are watching this recording afterwards as well for your interest. Today, we will learn more about the Nonhuman Rights Project and the struggle to gain legal rights for non-human animals. And we'll be speaking to Steve Wise, who is a diligent, brilliant and determined legal expert on non-human rights. I'm excited to learn about his groundbreaking work, but also hoping that you will leave the conversation enriched, equipped with some ideas for connecting with non-human animals, nature, to engage in creative policy transformation and determined advocacy. By way of introduction, I'll start with just a few highlights about our speaker. And if you are watching on our live stream or in the room, you should feel free to formulate questions of your own, and I will get to them within this hour. So Steve is an impressive soul. He was basically a public defender who switched his focus to non-human animals in the courtroom, serving as a lead spokesperson for this work. He's practiced animal protection law for 30 years throughout the US. He's the author of 5 books, 22 law review articles, 9 book chapters. He gave a TED Talk on the work of the Nonhuman Rights Project and was the subject of the HBO, BBC, Pennebaker and Hegedus film, Unlocking the Cage, which was nominated for an Emmy in the category of Best Social Issue Documentary. In 2018, he has taught animal rights jurisprudence at 9 law schools, including Harvard, Stanford, and Tel Aviv University. So this is obviously extremely impressive, and I look forward to this conversation very much. Welcome, Steve, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yay. Well, I think about the work that you did and started decades ago with no precedent, without a lot of partners in this work, needing to build up a library of articles, literature, and other work to support your legal challenges. I'd like to ask you, what made you do it? How did you get inspired? How did you get courageous and determined to do this work? Tell us a little bit about your journey, if you would.
Oh, I'd be delighted. I was a much younger lawyer 30 some years ago, and actually even more than that. I was just regularly practicing law for 3 or 4 years, and someone handed me a book by the philosopher named Peter Singer. Animal Liberation is the name of it. And I don't know why she gave it to me, but she did, and I read it. And while I was reading it, I understood how it was that non-human animals were being treated, were being abused, and there was nothing that they could do about it, and there's nothing anyone had done for them. And it appeared to me that there were either none or almost no lawyers in the world who were interested in trying to help them. And I thought, well, I think I'll try this. I think I'll do this. This is something that's really important to me after reading the book. And I just began trying to learn what animal welfare was and how I'd be able to maybe help non-human animals who had a problem that I could help. Or it was usually domesticated and owned non-human animals like dogs or cats, where something had happened to them and people would come to me, or they would do something, especially dogs. Over a manner of 25 years, I represented almost 150 dogs who had been ordered executed for doing whatever they were said to do, and it really had never been done before. So it took me a while to figure out how to do that, and then I ended up saving all but about 3 dogs in all those years. So I was interested in that. And then in 1981, I saw that there was a conference for non-human animals who are interested in as being a lawyer helping non-human animals in New York City the day after Thanksgiving in 1981. And so I went down to New York City, and that's where I met some people who I know now, and we became members of Attorneys for Animal Rights, which was later named again the Animal Legal Defense Fund. And I was the president of that for 10 years, from 1985 to 1995. But about 1995, I'd been working for 4 or 5 years, and I realized that there was nothing that I could really do to help them. There were no ways of being able to help the right of a non-human animal, because no non-human animals had any rights, and people treated them the way that they wanted to treat them mostly. And I decided that what I would do was spend my life trying to reach the point where we'd be able to have non-human animals actually have real legal rights. And in 1985, I believed that it would take 30 years of work before I could even bring a lawsuit that had any chance of winning, because no one taught um, the rights of non-human animals. And, no one really wrote about it. There was very little out there, and there were no classes that people could take to learn about animal welfare or animal rights, at all. Of course, animal rights would be very easy to learn because there weren't any. But the question of how you move an entity who is a thing, that means an entity who has no ability to have any rights, how you turn them into a person, which is an entity who has certain rights, or at least the capacity to have animal rights, then it was going to take a long time. And so in the coming years, as you read, I began to write articles, I began to write books. I started working in law schools. And it was 1990 before I got my first job teaching animal rights law. And then the second one was Harvard in 2000. And that was the time when people began to realize that, hey, if Harvard Law School lets someone come in and teach animal rights jurisprudence, and maybe it's not a totally crazy field. And so I wrote books, and I did everything as I tried to get people begin to believe in it and think about what the problems were. And I actually did that for 22 years until 2007. And that's when the organization that I had formed began like well, I began thinking, how am I going to begin getting ready to file these cases? Where do I do it? What kind of causes of action will there be? What can the Nonhuman Rights Project do? How long will everything take? And our first lawsuit was then filed in 2013, and we file well more than one a year. And now we're about to move in the year 2022 from having one very complex lawsuit we have been working on in New York, and there'll probably be about 7 lawsuits we'll be working on a year from today, in not only in the U.S. but also in Israel and in India.
Well, that's exciting, and I know that represents an enormous sum of energy and courage, especially given there wasn't a lot in the way of thought partnership and resources and organizational support and legal precedents. You had to, I'm sure, feel lonely at times. Can I ask you, now that things have changed, I was thinking about how now, even after, I think, a very long battle in Aotearoa, the Wanganui River has some human legal protections now, and this is, of course, something powerful for the climate crisis. But I'd like to ask you, before we talk about some of those intersections, how things have changed, and in so doing, perhaps you can share some additional updates on the work and where we are today in terms of context and landscape around this issue.
Well, in 1980, there were so few people that I actually didn't know anyone for a year. I thought I was the only person in the world who was a lawyer who was trying to help non-human animals. And then after that, meeting in the day after Thanksgiving in 1981, I began to meet a rather small number, and we began to work together to try to come up with ways in which we would be able to use the legal system. So we were all lawyers, be able to try to figure out how we can change the law. And of course, I was pretty young, so I didn't know a whole lot about that anyway. But I would learn it over the years, and we began to bring lawsuits, or we began that really only had to do with animal welfare. And most people who are interested in non-human animals are not interested in their rights, because they don't have any rights. But they're beginning to, or we're moving in that direction. In fact, in 2014, the Supreme Court of India stated that all non-human animals had both constitutional and statutory rights in India. And then, if I may say, let me see, today's Thursday. That means 10 days ago, on February 14th, the highest court in Ecuador also said that at least wild animals do indeed have rights in Ecuador. And I was involved in that too. I worked with the Harvard Law School, and we put in an amicus brief and filed a really good one. And that helped. I think we were cited 11 times by the court. So now there are two countries. You have India, you have Ecuador, where the highest court in the entire country has said that non-human animals can have rights. We have a lot more to do that in the U.S., because in the U.S., every single state has its own law. And so we've now gone to Connecticut and New York. We're working very hard in New York, but we're about to begin filing lawsuits in California, and as well as we are in Colorado. And as I said, we're going into Italy, Israel, Argentina. We talk to people all over the world who call us. We try to help them. So when I know somebody, especially a young person, say in his 30s or her 20s, they're kind of frustrated that they can't do anything. Things are going very, very slowly, and they're very angry. I said, I know how you feel, but that's because you see how it was 3 years ago when you got involved, and it's not much different. I said, I started this like 35 years ago. The world that exists today bears no resemblance at all to it was in 1980 and then 1985. And I said, these things can take a long time. Remember, non-human animals were entities who were considered to be things who lacked the capacity for rights. And they'd always been that way. So from between 2,000 and 3,000 years ago, when we understand law, there weren't any for non-human animals. They were all things. But of course, human beings were seen as things. There were slaves, there were women, there were children, there were people who were insane, there were people who were sick. All through the last 2,000 or 3,000 years, there's been all kinds of times when only humans had rights, but many humans, or probably most humans, didn't have any rights. And so one of the things that I did was actually write a book that was published in 2005 that was all about the most famous case in 1772, in which slaves were now no longer seen as slaves after a case that occurred and was decided in 1772. So, and then later on, you would have slaves in the United States. Also, some of them got free. Unfortunately, some of them came only after a civil war. But non-indigenous or indigenous Indians also were given rights. Women were given rights. Children were given rights. Crazy people were given rights. All kinds of. But until now, every human being is a person who has the right to rights. And now we're saying, well, now we're moving right on to non-human animals like the ones we're talking about, which are elephants, which are orcas, which are chimpanzees, and moving on from there to determine how we're going to protect them, because these non-human animals are extraordinarily cognitively complex. And what we've learned about that over the last 50, but especially even the last 5 or 10 years, to understand who they are.
Thank you. And for me, it seems that this kind of work is also about bringing law and policy and adjudication to try to also respond to and shift mindset, right? And I think about a lot of it is building greater harmony with our environment, with other sentient beings. I mentioned the Wanganui River, which was given rights of personhood, and part it is because with that recognition comes greater capacity for connection, collaboration, empathy, in spiritual connection, and so forth. We cease to compartmentalize, I think, in the same way. So it's multifaceted and challenging work, I think, because sometimes the mindset shift has to precede legal success, I imagine. There has to be work that you do to reshape people's thinking. I want to ask you about, this wonderful work of creative application of the law required, I think, a lot of inventiveness, and it probably forced you to have to envision the world that you want to see, a better world, a brighter world, a kinder world, a safer world. What does the world look like if you succeed? You can speak to, of course, the world of these animals that who you're representing, like elephants, right? But also the natural world more generally. I think about the fact that there are so many more options for vegans right now. And even in carnivorous food chains, you now have vegan options. This is a big change. But if you can speak more broadly, not just about how the world would look for the elephants, but how it would look for all of us once you secure these big wins around non-human animal rights.
Well, there's a lot of there are many more people now who around the world who are working in these cases, and what we're trying to do simply is have non-human animals be treated like human beings. And so all the good things, all the bad things, all the easy things, all the hard things that we have for humans, we want to have for non-humans too. We want them to be treated in a fair way so that people can believe that non-human animals are entitled to respect, a general respecting. And unless you do that, then you remain a thing. And if you're a thing, that means you lack the capacity for any rights at all. We can own them. They are our slaves. Uh, luckily, I love my dog to pieces, so she doesn't worry that technically I am her owner. He is my slave. But we're trying to treat that, or to change that. And one way we do it is to call on the fact that over the last several decades, I think I'm not sure if you and I are still talking right now, because it looks like no one's moving. Oh, are you back? Oh, you are. Okay, great. And so what we need to do is to stop treating non-human animals the way you do rocks, the way you do gravel, the way you do grass. That's what happens, because they're all things. And that means whatever humans want to do, they can. Even the non-human animals who are made in the United States and then eaten, that's more than 10 billion animals, 10 billion non-human animals a year. It's just extraordinary. It's like 100, almost 150,000 or 150 animals a second, or even less than a second. They're being killed by the thousands or more, almost, or millions every single day. And we're trying to work to try to show what we now understand about human beings. So we try to, for example, when we are involved in going in front of a judge and putting in evidence and facts, we try to bring in the world's experts on like who an elephant is, who's a chimpanzee, who's an orca, whatever non-human animal will be our client, so they can begin to understand what they probably did not know before, is that many non-human animals, certainly the ones we represent, are these extraordinary cognitively complex beings who have these very complex lives. Uh, they care very much about themselves, their families, their social worlds. Um, we want them to begin to understand. Who knows what people think about when they look at an elephant or a chimpanzee or an orca or other non-human animals. And they think that they're very, very different than we humans are. What we try to explain to them is in many ways they're very similar to us. It just so happens we don't communicate the same way. But that doesn't mean, for example, that an elephant doesn't communicate. They communicate with each other beautifully. Same thing with chimpanzees. They communicate very well. And now we know that chimpanzees can actually use a sign language. But elephants are extraordinary. So are orcas. They can extraordinarily um, communicate with each other. And the question is, what do they need? What do they want? And that's what people are starting to learn even more. So we hope that non-human animals will be treated at least no worse than human beings, maybe even better, but at least no worse. And if they're having a problem, then lawyers or others can go in and represent them and try to save their lives or keep them from being brutalized. That's what that's what we do now. It's been, I guess I think I thought it was 30 years ago. I think I just realized that I'm doing the math in my mind. It's 42 years ago is when I started doing it, and the world indeed has changed so much. We're just on the verge and going over the line, as I said, in India, in Uruguay, that's or Ecuador, excuse me. They're starting to have judges look at non-human animals, even the ones, and as I should know, I've lost in front of judges who say, I'm really on your side, I'm in your favor, but I just can't do it. And that's the problem we often run into when we're at a lower court. What we are in New York now is for the first time, um, any English-speaking high court in the world is looking to decide whether or not a non-human animal is a person who has at least the fundamental right to bodily liberty, so they can't be held prisoners anymore in human prisons.
Well, that's extraordinary. And we are at such an important juncture. And I'm really glad that you have taken us here. And I do think that the transformation will be extraordinary and that we will look back at the time before with some measure of incredulity that we did not, in fact, give such rights to these animals before. So,
You know, it's funny. Sometimes we go in front of a judge and we've even had now judges say how much they agreed with us and they're sorry that there's a higher court than they are to make them rule against us. In fact, the latest judge ruled against us, but said what we were doing was extraordinary as non-human animals, and they used the word, quote, regrettably, unquote, I have to rule against you. She didn't want to.
yeah. And I think that what you're doing there and with a lot of this work is you are doing what I call a washing of the eyes, helping people to see things in ways that they haven't understood them, because we do kind of operate within well-worn grooves and do things the way they've always been done. And I think that this work is about jolting us into a state of wakefulness and awareness, and will be tremendously impactful. Part of the impact will come with stories being told and shared, stories of success, stories of efforts and failures, and your work. I know that one major documentary has been done about you, and several more are in the works, and that there's a major 14,000 word article coming out about you in the New Yorker,
Yes.
which is wonderful. So I want you to speak to us a little bit about that process, what it's like to read about yourself and to be able to have that platform now to tell the story, to get some attention for your cause, especially since by all appearances, you seem to be a very humble and perhaps even slightly shy professor. What has that been like, and why is that important, that storytelling, do you think?
Oh, you should see me in court. I may sound quiet here, but not when I'm in court. I'm determined
No
that I
doubt, no doubt.
and we have to win. You know, one thing I wanted to say was what the difference is between things and persons. You know, things really, don't have the capacity for any right at all. But if you are a person, that means you can have one right or no rights, but you have the capacity for it. 10 rights or a million rights. And uh, what we try to do is use those kinds of lawsuits to be able to explain to judges what they're looking at. But it's not just non-human animals. For example, in New Zealand, there's a river that's a person. There's a national park that's a person. In India, there's a river that's a purpose. In fact, there are there are things like I, which is a religion, but the holy books of one of the religions in India are seen as persons and not things, and and one part of the Amazon is also seen. The Amazon for the country of Colombia is seen to be a person, and everyone understands that once you're dealing with the person, that means you can't just do what you want to them, whether it's a river or anything, and or a human being. And so what we try to do is kind of lift humans or lift non-humans of all kinds up to where they're a person. Then we have to kind of look at them very carefully, and people just can't not pay attention to them at all. They have to pay attention to entities who have rights, and that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that part of it is also that these things, these entities, these beings can also be regarded as carriers of culture. And so part of shifting the
Oh,
story is about helping
oh yes.
people to understand why giving rights to this entity will also impact them, why it is a part of their heritage and their, so that they can look at it in terms of ancestral respect, in terms of, yeah. But just going back to the
By the way,
question,
it wouldn't be surprised for you to know that many non-human animals have cultures and societies as well. It's just not easy for us to understand, but the people who spend their lives studying them come out with books showing how some non-human animals have specific societies, specific cultures. And in fact, sometimes it's not like a chimpanzee has a culture, but you'll find in Africa where there's all kinds of societies of chimpanzees, and sometimes it turns out that they don't have the same culture. In fact, some of the things that they believe in, they use opposite signs, do opposite things for the same thing. They've come up with their individual ways of viewing what they have, and they aren't the same. So they can't understand each other perhaps any more than we can.
absolutely. Well, so I did want to just touch upon the previous question, though, which is, why is the storytelling about this work so critical? And why is it meaningful that this article, these films are being done about you, but also importantly about the work? And what do you hope to see in terms of that storytelling moving forward?
Well, we want people who might want to, help us be able to get those stories out. By the way, it's a thing we're very concerned about. We we want to tell stories. We always tell stories about our client specifically, as a female or male, but also the species to talk about, who they are. And there's so many things, especially with elephants or chimpanzees or orcas. There's so much like human beings that when you begin hearing stories about an orca or a chimpanzee or an elephant, what they do is so reminds us so much of things that we do, the things that we think about, the things that we're important. We find that many of the non-human animals are also important, and we understand that we and they should be treated in similar ways. Now, we're not saying that's true for every non-human animal. There's probably a million species, and most of them we don't even know anything about. But the ones that we do know everything about, and those that we know a lot about, and we understand that they are these extraordinary, autonomous, and cognitively complex beings, mean, that's why we think that humans should have rights, because of who we are, our brain, our minds, our social lives. Well, it just turns out that there are others who have it too. And it's good for us to recognize that's the sort of thing that humans should have about other humans, but also it should have about anyone who has those similar kind of characteristics.
Thank you. And I look forward to the amplification of these stories, the stories of the animals themselves, as well as this work, so that you can be joined with creative and determined, courageous others. I want to ask you, because it's been such hard work, how have you found a work-life balance, so to speak, if indeed there is such a thing, when your life has this big purpose, right? And I know you've had to be incredibly industrious. How do you balance or frame this work in terms of the rest of your life, and how do you manage to remain resilient and hopeful?
I'm not really sure how I do, although I know I do. Uh, I mean, as people who know me, they know that I generally work 7 days a week. I have for decades, and one of the reasons it is because I think what I'm doing is really important, and also that potentially millions, hundreds of millions, billions, hundreds of billions of non-human animals can started to be helped. And what I'm doing is something at the very bottom, trying to begin the process, the important process that will then eventually uh, go to other non-human animals all over the world, and there'll be a lot of entities who are then saved. Huge numbers are going to be saved. And to me, I can't think a more useful thing for me to have. Now, of course, I also have 4 children, and I spend time with my children. And but I'd say being with my children, although they're grown now, so I'm not with them as much as I should. Uh, but those sorts of things is what I do is mostly think of what has to be done, think of what we can do to help non-human animals, knowing that we may not help the ones that are living now, or the next generation, or the next generation, or the next generation, but eventually we will, and we'll start saving them in greater numbers.
And we have to plant seeds in the shade of trees under which we might never sit, right?
Exactly, exactly.
May I ask, if there is one definition of peace or peace building that rises up in importance for you more generally. We at the Matsunaga Institute for Peace have classes in a wide variety of subjects, right? Indigenous peace and personal peace and conflict management and negotiation, mediation, and peace education and leadership for social change and movement building and so forth. But the idea is that everyone has a different point of entry and a different definition of peace, whether that's personal peace or interpersonal peace. What is your definition of peace? What comes to mind for you?
Well, it's when all of us let humans or non-human animals live the kind of lives that they want to do. And I mean, even humans don't get all rights, because unless you want to live by yourself. But if you want to live with a lot of people, you have to learn to live in a way that uh, does things to make sure that people act right, but allows them to do as many things as possible. It's so hard to do that for a non-human animal, because the vast majority of human beings simply don't know who they are. They don't know what they are. Um, with one big exception, I've noticed that people who live with their dogs or their cats for years and years and years, they begin saying the same things I am, even though they're not animal rights people, or they don't have never thought about it. They begin, as the months and the years go by, of thinking that they essentially have another family member. It's just another species, but they truly feel that their dog, say, is a member of their family. And I think that kind of feeling is going to extend to non-human animals that are just not domesticated, but maybe wild, maybe used for other reasons too. As we begin to look at them, and you need people who do movies, who do television, who write books, who tell stories, who have education, who teach, who learn. You need all of these things to be able to build the kind of world for non-human animals that we've been working on so hard to do it for human beings. We're a lot better, we're a lot further down for human beings than we are for non-human beings.
Yeah. But some we compartmentalize with human beings too, don't we?
Yes.
With distant and different others, we cease to feel, even though we have all of those mirror neurons and we are hardwired for empathy. Sometimes we lose that capacity, and I think that this is really deeply important practice, and that once we can extend those sympathies, real connection, and a familial sense. You see these beings as part of our extended family, or indeed see nature. Here in Hawaii, of course, the indigenous community here, Kanaka Maoli Hawaiians, often speak about Kalo or Tero as the ancestor, or the land as our grandmother, right? And so there is some language around that concept that I think is fructifying. It's useful. It's and certainly expansive. So I want to invite those of you who are watching on the live stream to also place questions there, which we will collect. If you have any questions at all for Steve Wise, please share them. I want to ask you, we have here a lot of peace builders in our program that who seek to create organizations and nonprofits to champion their causes. I'd like to ask you perhaps to speak about the building of a nonprofit, since you've done that so well, you've been successful. Do you have advice for anyone who wishes to start up a nonprofit or project? What is that? And what did you pay attention to, focus on and do in order to build yours?
Well, I realized that the problem I was trying to solve was way beyond my ability to do it all by myself. And for many years, when I would go out and give a talk somewhere, say I went to a university and I spoke, I would say, what I'm doing and say, anyone out there who wants to help, just, call me up, send me an email. And that way we could start to work together. And at one point, I think I had almost 50 people. They're all volunteers, including myself. We were all volunteers for many years. And where I was trying to work with them and try to figure out all the information that we need, and then once we got some money coming in, then I began to use it to spend on people who are very competent, but not only very competent, but very determined to win, and were intended to persevere in hard times, and it is in hard times. Um, Certainly in what we're doing when it starts, and some judges are like that now. They still are the same place they were 20 years ago, but a lot of them are not. And it's kind of what we humans do. Some of us just end up kind of liking some humans or not liking some humans, and there's not much we can do about it to make people like people they don't, or don't who they do. The same thing happens sometimes with non-human animals. Some people really love them and they agree with what we're doing because they kind of feel about non-human animals the way we do. And there are others who don't want to have anything to do with non-human animals and just kind of see them as things that are meant to be utilized by humans. You basically have them be these terrible slaves their entire lives, but we can do whatever we want to them. And it takes a while for those kinds of cultures, our kinds of societies begin slowly to move to treating non-human animals the way that we're supposed to be treating human beings. It's slowly happening. It's slowly happening. As I said, 2022 and 1980 have almost nothing in common with each other. There's so many more people who are interested in it and who work hard for it than ever happened 40 years ago.
What is needed in the way of resources, do you think, or human and other resources to turn the corner on this? And, looking at your 7 cases that you mentioned, what would you ask for if you could be guaranteed the support that you seek?
Well, people who are interested in any kind of work, especially like ours, we like them to look at what we do and try to persuade others to act in that way. If they're lawyers, will they take cases? Although it's not easy to do these sorts of cases because I've been working on it for 40 years and I probably know a bit more than people who just step out. But we have lawyers who are young. We brought in some of them. We've only brought in for 2 years, some of them for 3 years. They learn really, really quickly, and they learn how to do extraordinarily good jobs. And those are the people we're really looking for. We have probably 10 lawyers. I'd like to have 20, 30, 40, 50 lawyers. And we not just working in 1 state or 2 states or 3, but in working in 10 states or 20 or 30 and have it be discussed. And a lot of people aren't going to like us, but we'd still like to have that out there. That's the people go through a lot of steps, and even people who don't like us, eventually, if they listen to what we're saying, many of them actually change their mind. And that's, I have right behind me about 150 books on the history of human slavery. And so I've read them several times, and they taught me how humans are treated as slaves all over the world, why they were treated that way, what caused them not to be treated that way, what happened to have them keep being treated that way. And we can see more than 2,000 years took it. I mean, it almost took the whole 2,000 years to stop having slaves because we wanted to abuse them. We wanted to be their master. And it took a long time, but now that is gone. But only really since the 20th century has it really gone formally. You can't have slaves anywhere in this world. You can act illegally, but you can't do it legally. But it was not that way for hundreds and hundreds of years. That's what we're trying to do. Have people realize that there are certain ways and certain rights that a non-human animal can have, and you have to treat them that way. And if not, something can happen to you, either to punish you if you did something cruel to them, or to have you pay them whatever they need to have, whatever cost them, whatever prevented them from being able to have places to live, to eat, to live with their families. And so many of them, I mean, I'm sure there are non-human animals out there who don't have families and societies. I don't know who they are, but the ones I study, they all have societies. They all have cultures.
Thank you. So some more questions from the chat here that I'm getting direct messages for. A caller asked, since you're an expert, what surprising information have we learned about elephants, whales, orcas, and dolphins?
We've learned that they are extraordinarily cognitively complex, that they're autonomous beings, that they think about how they themselves are in the world. They understand their children. They understand their parents. They understand their siblings. They, like elephants, for example, if they're in the wild, they'll live in families of, at least the women will, and the children. They'll live with 10 or 20 or 30 at one time. And in fact, they oftentimes go together. And sometimes they stop agreeing with each other. And what happens is that you'll have a group maybe of 30 people. Dr. Joyce Poole says that she's seen it. And they'll turn and they'll start speaking with each other. They'll have an argument as to which way they're going to go. And they either decide they're going this way or they're going that way, or they're going to break up. But the important part is that she says that they actually do discuss it. And that happens in a lot of species that I learn about really one by one as they're studied for years, trying to understand what did we not realize was going on, and now we've realized it. Even someone like Joyce Poole or Cynthia Moss, people who have worked with elephants for 50 years, maybe 60 years, um, they would still say they don't know everything. Hardly anything. But they've learned a lot, but there's still an awful lot for them to learn.
Well, that's exciting to
It is.
remain curious and open to that
They
learning.
are. They're
Yes.
extraordinary people. When I meet them, when you meet someone who cares about non-human animals and works with it for them for decades and really understands who they are and what's happening to them, and they become sympathetic to us because they understand that we're saying, look, a lot of things are happening. Maybe extinction is on its way to this sort of animal. We are in there to try to stop that, to try to stop it and change the world by changing the humans and having them having our own culture and society kind of fit in a way that makes it work, just like it does for humans. We don't do a great job with each other. We need to understand peace a lot better and spend a lot harder time working to be peaceful with each other, human to human. Well, the same thing happens for human to non-human.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question from live stream. Is it difficult to represent animals in the courtroom? Could you go over the process that you use to represent them?
Well, yes, it can be difficult when you go into court on behalf of a non-human animal. Well, first of all, we don't bring them into court. We would never bring an elephant or a chimpanzee, an orca into court. I mean, physically into court. We bring everything about them into court. We bring in experts and all kinds of evidence into court, but we don't bring the non-human animal. In fact, when I did those for 30 years, I represent 150 dogs. I never brought a dog in either. The reason being is that even I don't know how they're going to act. I don't know what's really going on in their mind. And they're not ready to be in a courtroom. It's all, God knows what would happen. Um, and then we try to then teach judges everything that we can teach them about who these beings are, make them understand that the ones that we have whose problems are before them are really extraordinary beings. And we have all these experts who can then tell them in great detail what kind of beings they are. And that, I think, is really important. And just trying to sometimes we use writs of habeas corpus. I mean, all of our cases are in habeas corpus. There's many reasons why we chose a habeas corpus, but one of the reason is the legal term called like res judicata.
All right, Steve, just in case we have students here who might not know what habeas corpus is.
Habeas corpus means that if somebody, it's always been used until we showed up with human beings, and it means if a human has been brought into has been kidnapped or has been taken away, then and someone finds out about it, they can then go into court and demand that the judge bring in the person who's holding another person and demand that they explain why they can do it. And if they can't prove they have a good reason for having for having what they have over the human that they're imprisoning, then they have to let them go right on the spot. I mean, like right there. And these things move fast. Sometimes the trial will start within 24 hours or 48 hours or 72 hours because liberty is something that we humans believe is really important for us. And so when someone seems to be imprisoned falsely, they want that decided to go really fast. And that's one of the things we try to do. We can make it go fast. We can, it's also something that they're supposed to say, look, if you don't have that kind of living, if you aren't able to live in a certain way because of the way that humans are treating them, then you have to stop. And they can. They're beginning to do that. There are some who are now winning in other countries, and I don't know if we're going to win in front of the New York Court of Appeals or not. But if not this time, then another time. And our arguments for why an elephant should have a right to bodily liberty and not have to be imprisoned in a zoo are very powerful. The arguments that the Bronx Zoo has don't exist. All they can do is whine, but that doesn't mean they won't whine. That doesn't mean that they won't win because they're simply whining, but they won't have any facts. Do you know, in all of the cases we've done, we've put in expert evidence from all over the place. We've never ever had the people we were suing bring in an expert and to say that we're wrong. There aren't. That's because they don't have any experts who will agree with them, and we know that sometimes. Well, another reason we bring habeas corpus is that they don't. There is no res judicata, and so if we lose, we can bring habeas corpus again for the very same animal, even 3 times or 4 times or 5 times. You can do it again and again and again, and in all the chimpanzees in New York, we brought a second time, and we could end up doing it a third time, except we can't find the chimpanzees. They're probably dead. They die easily. Same thing can happen with an elephant or with an orchid, that if you lose, you look and say, why did I lose this first time? It's the first time any case like this has ever been, say, in the state of California or the state of New York. What can I do to begin the process of having judges not think that they're just sitting there listening to crazy people? And that's one of the reasons why I have 5 books and I have 22 law review articles, and I've taught at 9 law schools, because almost certainly I've written more and taught more than the judges have. And I'd really appreciate it if they took the time to listen to what we're arguing. And over the years, they're starting to do it way more than they began 8 years ago or 9 years ago.
Thank you. So there's a question here. I sometimes see this is their culture, quote unquote, as a reason for the fishing, hunting, etc., of whales, dolphins. How do you approach this kind of reasoning for those who, have a strong culture of hunting?
Well, we try to give rights to the dolphins, the whales, for example, and say, I know you feel this way, but it's illegal. You can't do this anymore. And the whale has a certain right. The orca might have it, or will be a dolphin have a certain kind of a right, and that right is as powerful in that whale or the dolphin or the chimpanzee or the elephant as a human being does. And you have to learn that what used to be right. And we're living in a world now and building a peace in a world now that is, even though it's still not a very peaceful place, it's very more peaceful than it was 200 years ago or 1200 years ago. Fewer people are the victim of violence now, even though a lot of people are, but it's much less than it was 200 years ago or 1200 years ago. And it can take time for people to understand that they have to have a lot of peace in their feeling of how they think their culture should be.
Yeah, and I think probably one of the things it strikes me must happen is thought partnership and allyship from within a variety of cultures that do hunt. And I think that if from within particular cultures, when people start thinking imaginatively about how to retain cultural ceremony,
Yes.
image, artistry, and all those things, you can retain kind of the best and make certain cultural adaptations in order to honor the past, even as cultures change, because all cultures do change, right? And adjust. But it probably is something that it's hard when you don't have communities flooded with like-minded people. So part of it is just spreading the story, spreading the word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What we need to do is listen to children. Children love non-human animals, and then as adults, many of them stop doing it. They have to say, go back and think of when you were a child, why you like, why you love them, and keep it with you as an adult.
Yes, beautiful. Okay. Well, okay, there's another question here. I'm speaking fast because we only have 3 minutes.
Okay.
It says, Jane Goodall is one of your founding board members, obviously a groundbreaking scientist. How has her approach and her research supported your own?
Well, I think Jane believes in what the Nonhuman Rights Project believes, and so when we need help, she has filed affidavits. Last time I saw her was at the city council in LA when we were trying to help elephants and get rights there. Jane is very close to us, good friend. And we read a lot of hers. I have a lot of books by Jane Goodall right here. And we're honored that she works with us.
Well, I think that I'll never forget being in the room with Jane and about 300 other people, and she got everyone there to start going, whoo, 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 like to make these like everyone, all of these people who were dressed up and distinguished, and then just trying to speak the language of the chimpanzee or
I think she may have done that at the Los Angeles City Council when we were in LA. I think she did that.
She did that here at a big East-West Center gathering, I think during APEC or something. But there's something in that is, of course, connecting. And there's also something in that is joyful. So as the final question in the last 2 minutes, since you do work so hard, what is the fun part of your job? The person who, there's another question that came in, it looks like, but I don't know that we have opportunity for it. But just very quickly, what brings you joy in this work?
Knowing that we're helping a lot of beings who need our help. And that I think has allowed me to go for 40 years, feeling that I'm helping them. Most of them don't know who I'm helping them. Some of them might even eat me, but I respect that. But I feel that progress is being made, and I might not be able to help these elephants, say, but that doesn't mean I won't be able to help the next ones or the ones after that. And also I have lots and lots of books on non-human animals. I know many people who are determined to help them as I am, and they're almost always wonderful people. I really like to get to know them and talk to them about anything.
So they bring you joy. Yeah.
Like you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, I think it's time to close, but I do want to address this last question, if you can stay 2 extra minutes.
Sure.
And that is basically from a pescatarian, right, who wonders about whether who subsists on fish and vegetables, whether he's a hypocrite because of not being vegetarian or vegan. Is that a necessary part of the movement? And he also asks those who view this whether they have watched the Cove, which is disturbing and revelatory. But what do you say about veganism and or vegetarianism versus pescatarianism, or someone who is, what do you say to someone who
that's pretty much in the animal welfare movement, where they're talking about these sort of things. We focus in solely on rights, and rights with respect to certain species, one by one. So I hope you don't eat either orcas or chimpanzees or elephants. That would not be a good thing to do. There wouldn't be anything we could do about it right now, but that I would not do that. And it's clear that fewer and fewer people are becoming folks who are not vegetarian or not vegan, and those things are also, I think, are evidence of that there is a change going on. And there's even fake hamburgers being made that are going up by the billions. So do the best you can as quick as you can. That's what I say about everything we want towards non-human animals, but also understanding that we humans have lots of experiences and lots of culture and lots of different society. And there are certain things like the end of slavery was very, very difficult. It finally is over. And a lot of the problems that non-human animals, especially the ones that the kind we represent, have I think the same things are going to happen to them. It just takes a huge fight. And however, we're in it for a lot of fights.
And I think what you're saying is, I like this, do the best that you can, right? As quickly as you can. I think you're
Yes,
saying that you can be part of the movement before you have perfected your your practice too, right? I
that's
think
right.
the idea is to get everyone involved, everyone participating and connecting.
Yes,
Certainly, yes. And I think that, but that reflective practice that we challenge ourselves, you're also saying that sacrifices are necessary and it's hard work. And sometimes it's hard in terms of personal choices as well. Well, thank you. Our time has concluded. I really appreciate your conversation today, and you're helping us to consider this facet of peace building and such an extraordinary peace building career, making connections between legal protections and the need to shift our mindset and our diet and our entertainment, right? Because this is not just about animal farms and circuses and zoos, but it's anything that is for human pleasure and entertainment alone that's unnecessary. If we can eradicate things and expand and reconsider how we humans walk in the world, how we are subjugating other species as well as other kinds of nature and other humans to unnecessary suffering, degradation.
yes,
We can cease to be extractive, and we can develop a more relational, more connected mindset, thinking about our kuleana, as we say in Hawaii, our responsibility to all sentient beings and nature. And so I thank you for
thank you
this
for inviting
expansive
me.
conversation, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate the privilege of appearing with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope that all of you will join us for our next Careers in Peace Building talk story. And until then, be peaceful and well. Aloha.